The floodwaters roared like a living beast, swallowing the town whole, and in its churning, muddy heart, a soaked tabby cat fought the current, her eyes locked on a tiny calico kitten clinging to a splintered wooden plank. The kitten's terrified. Cries pierced the rain, but it was the tabby's next move that stole David's breath. She dove under the debris, vanishing beneath the dark water. David, a weary volunteer in a rescue boat, gripped the edge, his knuckles white. "Hold on!" he shouted into the wind, though neither cat could hear him. He'd seen strays flee floods before, but never one swimming toward danger. Why? The question burned in his chest as rain lashed his face. This wasn't just a rescue. It felt like witnessing a secret, sacred act of courage. David's boat lurched violently as a refrigerator, swept from some drowned kitchen, slammed against its side. He steadied himself, scanning the chaos. Uprooted trees, a child's bicycle, the roof of a shed spinning like a leaf. But his gaze snapped back to the tabby. She resurfaced now, gasping, the calico clamped gently in her jaws. The smaller kitten hung limp, waterlogged fur matted to its fragile body. David's throat tightened. He'd joined the animal rescue team after losing his own cat to a storm years ago. Tonight, the memory was a raw wound. Every life here felt personal. Every second mattered. The tabby paddled furiously toward a half-submerged oak tree, her muscles trembling with exhaustion. She wasn't just saving the kitten, she was defying the river itself. And David knew, with cold certainty, that neither would survive without help. He revved the boat's motor, its hum drowned by the flood's growl. "Come on, girl. Just a little closer," he whispered. But the water had other plans. A wave, thick, with branches and sludge, crashed over the tabby, wrenching the kitten from her mouth. The tiny calico vanished beneath the foam. David's heart stopped. Then, impossibly, the tabby dove again, a streak of brown in the murk. She emerged seconds. Later, the kitten once more in her grip. She scrambled onto the oak's lowest branch, draping her body over the calico like a shield. Rain pelted them both, the wind howling a mournful tune. David steered closer, close enough to see the tabby's ribs heaving, her green eyes wide with primal fear. Why risk this? She was skin and bone herself, a stray with scars on her ears, no collar, no home. What drove her? The mystery coiled in David's mind, sharp as a thorn. He tossed a flotation ring toward the tree. It missed, spinning away on the current. The tabby flinched but held her ground, licking the kitten's head with rough, urgent strokes. The calico stirred, letting out a weak mewl. Hope flickered in David, until a sickening crack echoed above. The storm. The oak branch, weakened by the flood, sagged under their weight. Splinters sprayed into the water. "No!" David yelled, maneuvering the boat inches from the tree trunk. He stretched out his arms, rain stinging his eyes. "Jump! I've got you!" The tabby stared at him, distrust warring with desperation. Her fur stood on end. She'd known too many harsh streets, too many humans who'd kicked or ignored her. David held his breath, pleading silently. "Trust me. Please." For a heartbeat, her gaze met his, deep, ancient, and strangely knowing. Then she nudged the kitten toward him. David scooped the calico up, its body ice-cold and trembling. Relief washed over him, until a guttural groan shuddered through the oak. The branch snapped, plunging the tabby into the water. She surfaced, choking, paddling wildly as the current dragged her backward. David lunged for her, but the boat rocked, slamming him against the helm. Pain shot through his shoulder. He blinked through the haze and froze. The tabby wasn't swimming toward him anymore. She was being pulled toward the collapsed bridge downstream, where jagged concrete and twisted rebar churned the water into a deadly whirlpool. "Fight it!" he screamed. But the flood was too strong. She vanished behind a wall of debris. Panic seized David. He gunned the motor, weaving past a floating car. The Coloco whimpered in his jacket, a tiny heartbeat against his chest. Where was the tabby? Had she been sucked under? He scanned the raging water, eyes burning with rain and dread. Then he saw it, a single paw, clawing at a metal signpost jutting from the waves. She was alive, barely. Her head dipped below the surface, then reappeared, gasping. But the whirlpool's edge was only feet away, its hungry roar drowning out all sound. David steered closer, his boat's engine sputtering against the current. He was 10 yards from her now, 5. He reached out again, fingers straining. Almost there. A submerged tree trunk, invisible beneath the murk, rammed the boat's hull. The impact threw David sideways. The engine died with a sickening whine. Silence fell, a terrifying vacuum, before the water's roar rushed back in. Adrenaline spiked David's veins as the boat spun, helpless, toward the whirlpool. The tabby's eyes locked on his, wide with shared terror. She was tiring, her strokes growing weaker, the current winning. The Coloco burrowed deeper into his jacket, as if sensing doom. David gripped an oar, plunging it into the water. But the whirlpool's pull was relentless, dragging them both into its dark, swirling heart. The tabby's head dipped under, once, twice, then didn't resurface. The water closed over the spot where she'd been. Gone. David's breath caught. The boat lurched violently, tilting sideways. Below him, the whirlpool yawned wide, a watery grave. He had seconds, one choice. Dive after her? Or save the kitten and himself? The water roared like judgment in his ears. David didn't think. He moved. The whirlpool's roar filled his skull, the boat tipping violently beneath him. The calico, Kitten, a shivering lump inside his rain-soaked jacket, let out a feeble cry. "Save the kitten! Save yourself!" The sensible choice screamed in his mind. But the image of the tabby's green eyes, wide, ancient, pleading, flashed before him. He'd seen that look only once before. In his own cat's eyes years ago, trapped under a collapsed porch during a storm he'd arrived too late to weather. He couldn't fail again, not this time. With a guttural yell against the water's howl, David plunged the oar deep, not to row, but to anchor. The wooden shaft jarred violently in his hands as it struck something solid below, a rock, a car. He didn't know. It held just for a second. It was all he needed. He threw himself sideways, not into the sucking maw of the whirlpool, but down, deep into the churning, ice-cold darkness where the tabby had vanished. The floodwater hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath, filling his ears with a suffocating thunder. He kicked blindly, his free hand sweeping through the murk. Branches scraped his face. Unseen debris bumped his legs. Where is she? Panic clawed at his throat. Gone. Too late. Then his fingers brushed against fur, wet, limp. He grabbed, pulling hard. It was her, the tabby, a dead weight in the current. He locked an arm around her sodden body, kicking desperately toward the dim, rippling light above. His lungs burned. The calico, still tucked inside his jacket, pressed against his pounding heart, a tiny, fragile counterpoint to the tabby's stillness. He burst through the surface, gasping, choking on filthy water. The boat, miraculously, was still there, held by the wedged oar, spinning wildly just feet from the whirlpool's edge. He hauled himself and the tabby over the side, collapsing onto the cold, wet floor. The calico tumbled out, mewling weakly. David rolled onto his knees, ignoring the water sloshing around him, his hands instantly on the tabby. She wasn't breathing. Her body lay utterly still, water streaming from her matted fur. Her eyes were closed. "No!" David choked, his voice raw. "Not like this!" He remembered the animal rescue training, gentle compressions on the rib cage, clearing the airway. His hands trembled as he tilted her head, wiped mud from her nose and mouth, and began rhythmic presses. "Come on, girl," he pleaded, rain mixing with tears on his face. "You didn't give up on her. Don't give up now." He bent low, covering her nose and mouth with his own, breathing short, careful puffs of air. The calico crawled closer, nudging. The tabby's still paw with her tiny cold nose, a soft, questioning whimper escaping her. Time stretched, thin and agonizing. The boat groaned against the oar anchor. The whirlpool roared its hunger just beyond. David's shoulders slumped. Too late? Again. Then a shudder. A faint, wet cough. Water bubbled from the tabby's mouth. Another cough, stronger this time. Her chest heaved. Her eyes flew open, wide, disoriented, terrified. She scrambled weakly, claws scraping the boat's floor, trying to get away from the giant hands looming over her. David froze, pulling back instantly. "Shh, it's okay," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. She's safe." He gently nudged the calico forward. The tiny kitten, sensing her protector, wobbled unsteadily and pressed her damp face against the tabby's side. The tabby flinched, then stilled. Her wild gaze darted from David to the kitten nuzzling her. Slowly, slowly, the panic in her eyes softened. A low, rumbling purr, weak and raspy but unmistakable, vibrated through her waterlogged body. She lowered her head, nuzzling the calico back, a rough, tender lick sweeping over the kitten's head. In that moment, huddled together in the spinning, half-sunken boat amidst the apocalyptic flood, a profound bond sealed itself, not of blood, but of something deeper. Sacrifice. Trust. David felt a sob catch in his throat. He hadn't just pulled a cat from the water, he'd witnessed a soul choosing love over fear. The reprieve was brief. The wedged oar splintered with a sharp crack. The boat lurched violently, spinning free, caught once more in the current's relentless pull towards the whirlpool. David lunged for the motor, yanking the starter cord. Nothing. Again. Click. Click. Dead. The whirlpool's edge was feet away now, the roar deafening, the pull terrifyingly strong. Water surged over the gunwale. The tabby hissed, pressing herself, and the calico low against the floor. David grabbed the only thing left, a frayed length of rope coiled near the bow. He saw it then, upstream, a massive, half-submerged delivery truck lodged against the remains of a brick wall, their only chance. He looped the rope quickly, desperately, around a cleat on the boat. "Hold on!" he yelled, though he knew they couldn't understand the words, only the urgency. He threw the rope with all his strength. It snaked through the air, heavy with rain, and caught. The end looped around the truck's mangled side mirror. David pulled hard, hand over hand, muscles screaming, the boat groaning in protest. Inch by agonizing inch, against the flood's mighty drag, he hauled them away from the whirlpool's maw, closer to the relative shelter of the truck. The rope bit into his palms, drawing blood, but he didn't stop. The tabby watched him, her, green eyes fixed on his struggle, the calico shivering beneath her chin. They reached the truck. David secured the rope, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They were out of the whirlpool's immediate grasp, but far from safe. The water was still rising, lapping dangerously high inside the boat. The storm showed no sign of relenting. He huddled the cats close, using his own body to shield them from the worst of the wind and rain. The tabby didn't pull away. She leaned into his warmth, her purr returning, a fragile engine of survival. David stroked her head gently, feeling the ridges of old scars beneath her wet fur. "You brave, beautiful fool," he murmured, his voice thick. "What made you do it?" He noticed something then, tangled in the fur near her shoulder. A thin, faded blue ribbon, impossibly old and worn, knotted tightly. It looked deliberate, like a token, a memory, a mystery deepened, but the immediate struggle for survival pushed it aside. Hours crawled by. David kept watch, bailing water when he could, whispering reassurances to the two cats clinging to life and to him. As dawn began to bleed a bruised gray light through the relentless rain, the distant, blessed sound of another motor reached them. Rescue. Wrapped in thick blankets in the warmth of the Animal Rescue Center hours later, the transformation was breathtaking. The calico, now named Ember for the fiery orange patches on her tiny face, slept soundly in a soft nest of towels, her belly full of warm formula for the first time. The tabby, whom the staff had started calling River for obvious reasons, lay beside her. Clean, dried, her brown and black fur fluffed out, she looked regal. The deep scratches and exhaustion were still evident, but her green eyes held a new softness as she watched Ember sleep. David sat on the floor beside their enclosure, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside him. A kind-eyed vet, Sarah, approached him, holding a small plastic bag. "We found this knotted in her fur when we cleaned her up," she said softly, handing David the faded blue ribbon. "It's very old. And look." She pointed to a tiny, almost invisible mark near the knot. Not a stain, but a faded, hand-painted symbol. A single, delicate paw print. David's breath hitched. He remembered the news reports from years ago, after a devastating flood in a neighboring county. A local woman, known for feeding the strays, had painted tiny paw prints on ribbons. She tied loosely around the necks of the cats she cared for, especially the mothers with kittens. She'd died in that flood. Many cats perished or scattered. "This ribbon," David whispered, turning it over in his fingers. She was one of them. One of Mrs. Gable's cats. He looked at River, understanding dawning like the weak sun finally, breaking through the clouds outside. She wasn't just a stray, she was a survivor of another flood, a mother who had known loss. The faded ribbon wasn't just decoration. It was a relic of a lost home, a lost human, perhaps. Lost kittens. That's why she dived for Ember. She recognized the cry of a kitten alone in the water. She knew that terror. She'd lived it. She risked everything because she couldn't bear for another tiny soul to be swept away like hers had been. David opened the enclosure door slowly. River lifted her head, watching him, but didn't retreat. He reached in, not to pet her, but to gently place the faded blue ribbon beside her. She sniffed it, a long, deep inhale. A low, soft sound, almost a sigh, rumbled in her chest. Then she did something David hadn't expected. She nudged the ribbon towards the sleeping Ember with her nose. A quiet bequest, a passing of the torch. David's vision blurred. He scooped Ember gently into one hand and offered his other palm to River. She hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then, slowly, deliberately, she stepped out of the enclosure, walked across the blanket, and butted her head against his hand. Not just accepting touch, seeking it, claiming it. Her purr, deep and resonant now, vibrated through his bones. She looked up at him, those ancient green eyes holding a universe of pain, courage, and finally, a fragile, hard-won peace. She leaned her full weight against his leg, a silent declaration. "This is where I stay." David looked down at the tabby who swam through hell for a kitten that wasn't hers, and the tiny calico whose life was a testament to that impossible love. He thought of the empty house he'd returned to, the silence that had echoed since his own cat passed. The silence was over. He stroked River's head, feeling the ridges of her scars, symbols of a past she'd overcome. "Welcome home, brave girl," he whispered, his voice thick. "Both of you." He picked Ember up, cradling her in the crook of his arm, while his other hand rested firmly, protectively on River's back. She leaned into him, her purr deepening, a rumble of pure contentment. The storm outside was finally easing. Sunlight, true and golden, streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. It fell across the three of them. The man who thought he'd lost his capacity for this kind of hope, the kitten who embodied second chances, and the scarred, heroic Tabby who had crossed floodwaters guided by a memory of love. She had saved Ember from the river's fury, and in doing so, she had finally led herself and David out of the lonely currents of their own pasts. River lifted her face into the sunbeam, her eyes closing in pure, quiet bliss. The faded blue ribbon lay beside her, its tiny paw print a silent testament to a love that endures, a courage that defies the flood, and the mysterious, unbreakable thread that connects one lost soul to another, leading them all, finally, safely home.